Welcome to the Lightforge. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps, and one more week post. I get. I was supposed to have a clever phrase for this. You know how there's like AD and BC. I was supposed to have like a clever acronym for like the post big change, like the post meteor, the post Big Bang, something. I have no idea. You want to think of something for me?
I don't know Latin, man. I feel like those things are in Latin. Isn't that what BC and AD are?
I don't know enough to refute that.
Great, so we don't know what we're talking
I
about.
have no
Let's move on
idea.
to something we do sort of know what we're talking about, at least a little bit on, which is the arena and this Karazhan patch that came out. We've been playing a lot of Hearthstone in the last week and a half, and I think we have a decent sense, at least, of what the meta is like and what we're doing here. So let's answer the burning question first, and you go first, Merps. The patch was made to make the arena better. Is the arena better?
Right, right. Okay. So I think this is appropriate to talk about because the first and basically only change that Blizzard has made to the arena, what were the reasons for, right? I think they basically summed it up as we want arena to seem fun and we want a better balance, right? So better balance and more fun. So did it or has it succeeded so far in those two? And I would say no. I would say no in terms of it didn't really improve diversity. The decks the classes that they sort of buffed have risen, but so has every other class basically. So that
You mean that they just buffed everything, so everything
yeah,
has,
yeah.
relatively speaking, still kind of the same?
Right. So, you buff everyone, and if you just took like these, the now hunter and now shaman decks and looked at them, you're like, oh wow, because I have a previous sort of standard for them, these seem to be better, right? But it's like every shaman deck I draft right now, I'm like, oh wow, this is really good. Hunter drafts that I get, I'm like, oh wow, this is really good. I have unleashes and Glavezukas, and everyone just has better drafts. And in terms of sort of balance, everyone just gets a little bit more powerful. And in terms of diversity, man, I mean, I
Okay,
still
let's
seem
talk about
to.
balance first. We can talk about diversity afterwards
Okay,
and how much
sure,
we miss
sure.
Snipe. But balance wise, isn't it more balanced? Because they did basically increase the power of the lower classes and decrease the power of mage, if only a little bit. Are you really saying that mages compared to, let's say hunter or warlock or priest or whatever, right, is about the same as it was before the patch?
See, I don't know if mages got weaker. I really don't know because with the offering bonus to Firelands Portal and them taking away Forgotten Torches, whatever. But then they took away two minions, and now mages just have a ridiculous amount of spells. They have all the flame strikes, all the frost bolts, all the fireballs, whatever. It's just remove, remove, remove. Um, it feels like if I am playing any other class, that the mage is going to have at least twice as many spells as I am. And spells are ridiculously powerful in the arena, right? They typically have a good sort of damage to mana ratio to them, and they have initiative. So it gives you good value for your mana cost, and you're able to sort of protect your face with the initiative, which is really important when you're playing the control style for the mage. So I don't think it got weaker. I really don't, even though it was supposed to, right? And we talked about how powerful Snow Chugger is. We talked about how powerful Faceless Summoner is. I don't think mages got weaker.
So I mean, I would disagree here, but let me just start off by saying it shouldn't be. It's not a problem that mages have more spells. Mages are supposed to have spells. What do you think of when you think of a mage? Spells. This is what mages
Sure.
do, and not coincidentally, all of it's. Well, I'm just looking at our tier list. The top 7 cards from mage, the ones that we categorize as great, except for Twilight Flamecaller, all the rest are spells. And that number, the 7, that is better than all the other cards. This is like basically everything that's a Kraken or better, right? A Pilot, a Shredder, or better. We have Kraken and Pilot, and Shredder at the same level now in this new meta.
Yeah.
So that's that number one. First of all, that number is not a ridiculous number. It is a number that is pretty much on par with every class besides Druid. Druid is crappy when it comes to high powered stuff. Because it's Druid, right? Like, we always knew that. Druid was always, like, a lot of, like, above-average cards, not a lot of terribly great cards. But besides Druid, all the other classes have about this number. Like, some have, like, 1 fewer. Warrior has, like, 3 more, but it's a Warrior. So we're generally in line. Now, Firelands Portal has an offering bonus, so you can basically count it as, like, 2 or 3 cards. And so mages are definitely on the upper end of this whole spectrum, right? Like, it still doesn't touch the Warriors with Fool's Bane, which has 1, 2... Let's count it as 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Warriors have a score of 11. Mages have a score of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So Warriors are still beating Mage out in the good card department, and then you go to some, I don't know, let's pick a random class. What's a random? Paladin. That's a normal class, right? Blizzard likes it. Blizzard
and
thinks
that's
it's
the
balanced.
most normal of classes according to Blizzard.
Right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? So 7 is kind of the normal number. Anyway, what I'm saying is, yes, mages have a lot of spells. They should have a lot of spells. They are getting a little bit more spells than the average class, but they're not getting double. Like,
No.
When it comes to the fact, when you're thinking they're getting double the amount of spells, what you're really saying is they're getting a tiny bit more of the good cards that everybody's getting, but all of them are spells because it's a mage. That's like saying, I hate playing against a warrior because it seems like they just have so many weapons. Yes, they do have so many weapons. It's a warrior.
Sure,
That's what they do.
I mean, this argument that, like, well, mages are supposed to have spells and warriors are supposed to have weapons, that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that, like, it's like, okay, well, we're talking about power and balance.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. The fact that mages have so many spells doesn't make it more powerful. The card value makes it more powerful. Or, like, the hero power and the way that you're able to play. And mages, well, the power of the mages that you can play off the board, so you're instantly, like, twice as powerful in terms of your flexibility options as any other class when it comes to the draft and the play. But I don't think the problem anymore, or even before, was really that they have all these high-powered like spells or whatever. It's the mix of like the hero power, it's a mix of the meta, it's a mix of this offering bonus. So when it comes to, and when you look at it in the aggregate, when you put numbers to things, when you look at what the mages are doing right now, I think either because there was only 1 week, or like a week and a half, I guess, of the Karazhan meta with the offering bonus without the patch, right? And this new meta. But I think mages are definitely weaker now when you compare it to Hunter. Like, the distance between mage and Hunter has definitely closed. I don't think it's close. Hunter, back in that 1 week and a half, was not very close to mage. It was doing well compared to other classes, and it's doing, I think, even better now compared to other classes, maybe except shaman. But it was not touching mage even closely, right? You were just going to get rolled. And now I think it's closer. I don't think it's approaching the level of mage or anything like that, right? Like you said, right? Relatively speaking, things are still kind of where they are. Maybe rogues got hit a little disproportionately hard. But if you're looking at the distance between the best and the worst classes, or the best and the average classes, I think balance-wise they got better. And let me put out one more thing to bolster my claim that the balance did get better, and that is that everyone curves out better, right? Mages curve out worse. Rogues curve out worse, but rogues have a hero power, so you never really care about rogues and 2-drops. And there are other...
Mages curve out worse?
Huh?
Because of Medivh's Valet?
Well, what do you mean because of Medivh's Valet? Medivh's Valet offering rate didn't go up.
No, it didn't go up, but before, I think you actually had a chance to, like, get too many 2s with Mage. The problem I'm actually...
Yeah, it went down.
Yeah, it went down. So now your curve is actually better because you don't have as many, like, a glut on...
Oh, you're saying mages were over 2'd before. Maybe. Okay, I can see that. But whatever. What I'm saying is your chances of hit... What I'm saying when your curve is just your chances of hitting your curve.
Sure,
So
sure.
your chances of hitting your curve is now like a bit lower for mage, and you're saying it doesn't really matter. So whatever, ignore the mage point then. It doesn't really factor into the argument that much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What matters is that the classes that are dependent on the curve, your priests, your paladins, well, not your paladins, your priests, your hunters, your warriors, they all have their curve now because they used to have less than five like viable two drops that you're able to pick, and you would have to like give up death spites for your two drops, and it was awful. And now they're all curving out. So yes, relatively between the hunter and the warrior, it's not like one got stronger than the other, but you have all gotten much stronger against the mage because now every time you draft, you are going to curve out, and there is absolutely nothing that can replace that for these classes. Warlocks, right? They're so dependent on the curve, and you have just solved that problem for them by these changes. So your classes gain a lot more consistency relative to the mage. Again, not relative to each other because they all kind of got buffed. Warrior feels really good right now. Hunter feels really good right now when you play. Every time I draft one of these classes, I'm thinking, all right, I have a deck I can play with, I can make decisions with. I'm playing a hunter, I can do things with it. I am in control more so. Obviously, you're still a lot less in control compared to like being a mage, which is a more control class, but you are in a much better place. You don't get unworkable decks anymore anywhere near as often as you got unworkable decks back in the day. So I think when you're talking about class balance on an absolute scale rather than a relative scale, the distance is closed. On a relative scale, I'm with you. Mage is obviously still the best. We said Mage was going to be the best before we saw any Karazhan cards. We just knew how Blizzard was thinking about this thing and what Karazhan was. We heard Karazhan and it was like, oh, it's a party, it's Medivh, mages, and then mages, and then mages, and the patch happened. We were like, yeah, Mage is still on top. And it's not a terribly insightful thing that, I think everyone was kind of seeing this after they saw the cards. And that's true. Mages are on top. They are still on top. Nothing's changed in that regard. But if you're a warrior and you're trying to take down a mage, things just got a hell of a lot easier, I think.
You know what's interesting? We talked about every single class, and we haven't mentioned Rogue even once, which is surprising because Rogues have. If you didn't think they were number one, then they should be a clear number two,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think with Rogues, it's just like, well, I don't know. The jury is still out. Like I've heard people say that they are, that they've
It's
been
okay.
bumped down quite a bit, but
Yeah, but they had plenty of room to fall.
yeah, they have plenty of room to fall, and I still have some pretty strong runs with Rogue. It's
Yeah.
just like the
I
decision.
see rogues, like, when I win a lot still, at, like, the normal rate. So it's not like
Right.
rogues have gone away, or that the people who used to play rogue now and, like, don't do well, like, uniformly. I think it's fine, but I don't think rogue is really, like, this seems weird to say, but, like, who cares about the rogue? It was the best class or the second best class. The second best class was not the best class. And now it is still the second best class, maybe the third best class at worst. Um, and really, balance-wise, if you're talking about balance, who cares? That is not a class you worry about. It's like Paladin, right? Like, who cares about the Paladin? Blizzard didn't. Blizzard looked at it and was like, alright, that seems good. And that's right, because those classes are fine. They don't need help. You can, like, put them down a little and it'll be fine. Just take care not to buff them too much and you'll be fine. So, I don't care too much about the rogue right now. The only thing to note is that rogue, the distance between rogue and mage definitely increased, right? Like, rogues fell more than mages. We all saw that coming. That's
Yes.
actually what happened. And so, relatively speaking, between the rogue and the mage, it looks like the mage is even better. But relatively speaking, between the warrior and the mage, mages are worse, or warriors are better. But either way, the distance has significantly and very noticeably closed. That's
Yeah,
how I feel when I play the lower classes.
right, right. I definitely agree with you there, and there might be something there in terms of, um, you had these two classes that could sort of challenge each other, and I would even say that, rogues, if you played them somewhat aggressively, can really challenge mages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially mages now that they're sort of power card in this expansion is Firelands Portal, so they have less chance to get AOE's. What can the rogues do? Just play out very tempo efficiently, go face. Firelands Portal, even though it's huge value, it is still a somewhat slow card. unless you get the Doom Guard off of it, which your opponents always do when they need it. But rogues could, in a way, counter mages, just like how we say hunter is it's
Yes.
not favored against them, but they could play in a fast style, which allows them to just
Compare it to
overrun.
playing hunters against the another like average class. Playing against a
Right,
mage is pretty good.
right. So I think that goes to part of how this plays out. If rogues fall a little bit, and then these other classes rise up a little bit, um, you just sort of get like mage by itself, right? And then
Yep.
you get these mage versus mage battles, and yeah,
Hmm.
sure, hunters get a little bit more powerful against the mage, warriors can get a little bit more powerful against the mage, as you say, but your clear number two, which I think had an advantage over mage if they drafted and played in a very fast style, now is at a pretty big disadvantage without Goblin Auto Barber and
Hmm.
Undercity Valiant, which were amazing temple cards, right? Just
Yeah.
premium temple cards.
Yeah. So you're looking at the meta now. Now you're not saying like, did the worst classes get better? Did the top classes get worse or whatever? You're not looking at balance in terms of the distance between the classes. Now you're looking at the actual meta. What do you see out there? What are people playing? People are playing mage about as often as before. And like we said in the very beginning, like, even when these changes were coming out, people aren't magically going to stop playing mage because they made it a tiny, tiny bit worse. That was never going to happen. They're comfortable with mage. Mage is an easy class to play. It has a high, like, it has a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling. Like, it's kind of the perfect class. They freaking built the whole game based around mage, right? Like, this was always going to be a popular class. They have the tutorial with mage. People, and especially if you're an arena player, you know how to play mage. All arena players know how to play mage. They then know how to play a bunch of other classes, but not all of them usually. But they all know how to play mage. So that's the kind of thing that's not going to change, right? So if you were expecting mages to be significantly fewer in the meta, like let's say the way when TGT came out and there were a ton of paladins, that didn't happen. Why? Because the classes people knew how to play didn't get buffed. And by classes people know how to play, I mean paladin. People apparently don't even know how to play druid, which I can't fathom, but it's another story altogether. Druid always has like a way lower win rate than we think it does. Because like for me, Druid's always like my third best class because it's so normal, so fundamentals, and I'm good at that because I'm a good arena player, and then I do very well with it. But I guess if you're not good at fundamentals and you have a whole class built on flexibility and fundamentals, that's not a good mix. And you'd rather go for like the very defined play style, like paladin, be on board, do stuff. Mage, like play big things later on. It's okay if you're off the board. Like it's a little more clear. But anyway, my whole point is the meta at the very very top has not changed. Right, I completely agree that I see as almost as many mages as I saw before, and however fewer mages that I see now isn't really terribly adding to my quality of life going to the arena. But one thing I do want to bring up, as a corollary to what you're talking about the mages, is the other classes, and the rogue and the paladin especially. I don't see as many rogues and paladins as I did before, and I see more of every other class.
Yeah, whether this sticks or not, I'm not sure, because we're still sort of in the honeymoon period, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where people want to draft these other classes, see what exactly is the effect of them taking out these cards. So yes, I see quite a few shamans. I see
Oh yeah, a lot of
quite a
shamans.
few, yeah, a lot of
We were
shamans, a
talking
lot of
before, right? Shaman's probably the third best class now.
probably. I also see a lot of warriors, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that comes from Fool's Bane and these changes at the same time,
Yep.
right?
And if you look at this, right, like these are the Karazhan cards in our tier list. So one of the things we did in our update last week for Firelands Portal is we like dropped it. We dropped it like a rock, right? It's at 80 now, which is
Which I mean, dropping it like a rock, it's still higher
yeah,
than
okay. It's higher than any common
everything.
neutral
Yeah.
card. But like I literally have it lower than Twilight Flamecaller. Like and a big part of it is kind of because it's a 7 mana card, right? Like
Well,
otherwise
it's
it
the
would
seven
not
mana
be.
card, the offering bonus.
Yeah, like all these things in the meta is working against you taking it that high. And RNG is the biggest part, I think, and we'll get to that. Deep fried meta's coming up next. We'll talk about RNG and deep fried meta. But it's a good score, and it reaches number 3. But what's number 1? Fool's Bane, right? Even in the very beginning, so Fool's Bane was definitely better than Firelands Portal, and it still is, and there's no RNG. But then number 2, what we now have is higher than Firelands Portal, which we had like 2 points apart, like the other way, but now we have a 4 points this way, is Spirit Claws. And that's an RNG card, but its effect even without RNG is so high. And that's something...
Spirit Claws.
Right? Like everyone hates Spirit Claws because it's an RNG card.
Claws. It's such a bad card.
Like
the
even
design,
if the RNG doesn't hit, like if you Firelands Portal and you don't RNG, it's bad. Like if you get a 3/3 out of it, it's a bad card. It's 7 mana, you deal 5 damage, you get a 3/3. It's like a 50 rated card. Like that's just where it is. If you get a Spirit Claw and you don't hit your spell totem, like you can still hit it later. You can hold the weapon. Or it's like a Light's Justice pretty much, right? The last hit on the Light's Justice is not that valuable anyway. And Light's Justice we think like the world of these days. So Shamans are like kind of partly also because obviously they have a ton of really insanely good cards as well. But if you look at it, like it's not really that much better than let's say Mage or like anything else. Warriors have even more general insane cards that all got a boost up when they removed all those bad warrior cards. But the Shaman it's hitting up because Spirit Claws. Spirit Claws they wreck in this meta, and they wreck when you hit the RNGs, and when you don't hit the RNGs, they're still really, really, really good because they are that ping that you need as a non-ping class, right? And especially the Shaman. You don't even, at least the Paladin has like I have a technically like delayed ping if I'm ahead on the board. The Shaman doesn't even have that. So Spirit Claws is even more valuable. And add Maelstrom Portal on top of that, which we also have rated above Firelands Portal. Partly because of that spell totem synergy, and partly because everything that deals 1 damage to everything is kind of insanely good. But yeah, so there's reasons why Shaman's so good. There are reasons why Shamans are so good. Everyone's talking about 4 mana 7/7s. 4 mana 7/7s are not the ones that are tipping the scale. They weren't tipping the scales in OG. They weren't tipping the scales in the Karazhan meta when the OG bonus, but like before the patch. And the patch raised the number of Flame Wreathed Faceless you see by like 0.2 per game. Like, everyone sees it and gets like triggered by it, but that's really not what's winning the Shamans most games. Statistically, it doesn't work out. When Shamans got better, it's because they got more consistent, right? It's this 2-drop thing that I'm talking about. If you can get all your 2-drops out as a Shaman always, and Shaman's always board-centric, and you have Spirit Claws and Maelstrom Portal, 2 really, 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 really good things about making sure you control the board no matter what happens, well, then you're in a very good spot.
Right. I mean, Shaman has always been one of these classes in which the power of its class cards is insane, right? It's
always been insane.
Right, if you look at the power of its cards, you're like, oh, it should be mage-like in power. Like, it just has these sickening class cards, which, I mean, if you were someone who looked at the game and just, like, evaluate card by card, like, the power, you'd be like, oh yeah, like it should be exactly where
Warrior's the best class in the game.
Yeah, or Warrior should be amazing because it has all these weapons and weapons are extra value. You know, unfortunately the game plays out in real time and you see it doesn't work out this way. But that was always something that the Shaman had going for it, just the value of these cards, and if you get them and you get them at the right time. So now, you know,
I love Hunter. If you really just look at the value of all the cards, by the way, like Warrior looks really impressive, but Hunter looks like almost equally as impressive, which is
Hunter
hilarious.
Looks pretty good. Yeah.
And Druid's the worst class of the game.
I mean, this is why Hearthstone plays out. Like, you know, you have to play it out, right? I remember before, like half a year ago, when we looked at the tier list and we saw it was like Priest should be the best class of all time. They just have so many value cards, right? They should be so good, but unfortunately it doesn't work out that way. But the sort of meta shift definitely helped out Shamans by allowing them to play out these strong cards and also to get these snowball cards, right? Like allow them to snowball and help them get snowball cards.
Like I hate the Shaman too, like facing the Shaman these days. But it's a new class in the meta, seriously in the meta. Paladin's still there. Paladin's always going to be there because people know how to play Paladin and they're so easy to play. Rogue is still there. It's still number 2 or number 3, right? Like depending on who you ask. And right, and people, at least good players, have mostly already figured out the rogue, so they're going to stick with it, especially when it hasn't been like nerfed too hard. And you're seeing warriors a lot now. I see warriors a decent amount. I think much more frequent than I've ever seen a warrior in the meta, because people are testing it out, because Fool's Bane is like the best card in this new expansion. That's a good thing. You still see plenty of warlocks. There are like warlock loyalists. Like, I swear, there are people who like just really like playing warlock, and they'll play warlock even if it's not the best class. And now it's in that middle glut, right? The glut that Blizzard balanced for. What other classes are there, right? Hunter's actively good. I think I see much fewer Hunters than there should be. I still think Hunters in this meta is like one of the best classes.
I almost never see Hunters.
Yeah, I never see Hunters. But like, I think that's because people don't know how to play Hunter. Like, we keep harping that like Hunter is like one of the most skilled class to play, even though you technically have the fewest decisions to make. But like each decision matters like so much. Like, you miss one, you lose. And if
like Hanzo, man.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like you're insta-locking Widowmaker in Overwatch, right? Like, if you keep missing your shots, like, you lose. But if you hit all of them, you win. And in Hearthstone, if you can have like a near 100% correct decision-making rate, Hunter's really, really good. But if you can't, Hunter is going to lose you a lot of games. But yeah, so Hunter's not really in the meta when you're thinking about what you're facing, but as a class to use and get good at, it's in a very good place. What else? Paladin's still there. We talked about that. Druid, I still see somewhere, because I think people think they can use Druid even if they can't, unless they're actually tracking their stats and seeing that they can't. Just because it has a hero power ping, it's a pretty basic class if you look at it. And if you don't have a lot of classes available to you, you probably may not want, like, if you're not comfortable playing a lot of classes, you don't want to like jump into like Hunter, Priest, or Warrior, or maybe even like Warlock or Shaman. They're all way weirder than Druid is. So depending, like, I still see enough Druids in the I have an okay deck and this deck is gonna go 7 wins ish kind of like meta.
Yep. So I think it remains to be seen whether, how do I put this? I think it remains to be seen whether or not like this will have the effect that Blizzard wants. But I don't know what Blizzard wants.
Okay, go to your diversity. Go to your diversity point, right? Remember, I cut you off in the beginning, and I said let's talk about balance first. Now let's talk about diversity. What did you want to say about diversity?
We touched upon the diversity aspect a little bit. Like, yeah, right. Like you see a couple more of this and that, but like at the peak, you have just the mage on mage battle. Sure. Right.
Yes. That didn't change. That was not going to change. We knew it wasn't going to change.
Right. And I know that bothers a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Right. It bothers a lot of people that there's like, right
the best class. That's what bothers people. That if you were to min max, you would pick mage every single time that it is offered, and it would be like actively stupid. Not just like, I can make an argument for it. Like right now, it would just be actively stupid to pick any class besides mage if all you cared about was winning.
Yeah. Yeah. So like if that bothers a lot of people, well, I mean, it might be even worse now, right? Because they don't even see rogues as as that close.
I think that's the thing. I think the thing is, because this patch got rid of the competition to such a degree, and it made the meta less favorable to rogues, because rogues are always okay-ish against mages, right? But like a lot of the other classes that rogues are actually like weaker to were much more out of the meta. Especially something like Shaman, for example, right? Where Shaman's whole focus is to like be on the board, and your daggers can't clear their totems. Like, it's not the same as having a ton of paladins in the meta, which is good for rogues. Having a ton of shamans in the meta is not so great, right? Having druids is not so great. And when all of these classes like get bumped up a tiny bit, like, I think it really affects how you're able to operate as the rogue, especially when you lose the ability that made you really good against some of the classes to begin with, which is that, like, the pings, right? The auto barbers, the
Undercity
Valiants, right? So, like, it kind of snowballs into this effect where rogues legitimately are very much not as good as mages now. And if you're looking at it and you are thinking of balance in terms of how many classes are in the top tier, right? Because there's two ways to look at balance. I look at balance as how wide apart are the classes, generally speaking. Some people just care about the top. And if
Yeah.
you just care about the top and diversity at the top, because you're never going to use those crappy classes like Warrior and Warlock and Shaman, whatever, right? Those are your opponents. That's all you care about. But what you want to do is you want to be able to play a few classes and play them really well and have them be really good. Then yeah, there is less diversity. Because they made rogues worse. Like, so you used to have 2, now you have 1. Yes, it is way worse than it was before. So I guess the question is how you look at whether things are better or not. Right?
Right. For most people, though, it's going to be no, because for most people, obviously, infinite players are just a small minority of players. So you have a lot of people who play the arena maybe once or just a few times a week, look at it and say, it's all mages, right? Like, I am just totally cutting off at least a win off my average if I don't pick mage.
Well,
I
but
don't
you
even
used
have-
to you used to cut off like 2 wins if you don't pick
Well,
mage or rogue.
no. But for them, like the fun factor is significantly decreased, right? It's not just sort of min-maxing. It's sort of like, well, I can't even pick rogue to
Right.
counter it. And then what I see now is sort of just, I'm not favored to win against mage unless I play mage, and then it's just the mirror match, right? And then it's just all
So
about
rogue
the
was kind
mirror
of like a mental buffer that's like, well, at least there's still rogue.
Exactly.
It's not the end of
Yep.
the world. And now the mental buffer's gone away. And it's like, even though things are actually better with every class besides rogue, like literally with every class besides rogue, things are better. The mental barrier of like, well, I at least had a second best class that can compete with mage is gone. So now, as long as I'm not offered mage, I'm screwed. And so
Yep.
I'm screwed doubly as often as I used to be, at least, or
Yeah.
whatever percentage you were offered mage.
Which
Oh,
feels
you were
terrible.
offered rogue but not mage. I can see that. I can see that. If your perspective is, I am screwed if I am not offered a top tier class, and the number of classes in the top tier has been reduced by 50%, you're screwed a lot more. But
Yes.
I don't think casual players are like that. I think casual players all have their favorite classes, and they're usually not mage and rogue, and they like to play them, and they're just going to do better with them now. Like, I know a bunch of casual players. They don't all play mage and rogue all the time. I think, if anything, the like infinite players or like almost infinite players and the super tryhard players, they're the ones that are playing mage and rogue because they're the
See-
ones that are min-maxing. They're the ones that are looking at it and being like, I need to win. I care about my win rate. I care about, all this stuff that like a casual player may not care about as much and may care more about the fun of playing these classes. What were you gonna say?
Now we're getting into sort of like human psychology
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like what exactly. I'm really not sure, right?
Mhm.
I obviously can't sit here and be like, well, look, I can get into the minds of all of these players, and let me tell you, here's exactly how they think. But I think a majority of people, if you play a game, you're going to do some research, right?
Yeah.
And right now, you don't have to do a lot of research to
Nope.
see that Mage is a clear-cut number one.
Mhm.
So
Consensus clear cut.
right. So I think it always does feel bad for them, to some capacity. And even though you could say, oh, I think this is fun, like for example, in Overwatch, like I'd love to play Torbjorn all the time because he has funny lines, and I love hammering my turret. But it feels bad when I lose,
Let me take
right?
that out of context. I love hammering my turret.
It's so fun. It only takes a couple of hammers to complete it.
5, right? 5
yeah.
exactly.
Exactly 5 hits
Precision.
every single time, man.
Precision Swedish engineering. Okay, so
Pays off.
yeah, okay. The whole like diversity thing though. What I want to add is here's how I think about diversity. I think about diversity as in being able to play the classes kind of as the game was designed for these classes to play. When I play warrior, I want my weapons, I want my flexibility, and I want my board, and I want my things to get injured. Like that, those are the warrior mechanics, right? And now I want taunts apparently, but like that's what the warrior does. When I'm a warlock, I want to get on the board early. I want my 1-drops. I want a hero power later on. I want to have some powerful board clearance in case like things get crazy to reset. If I'm a shaman, I want to have a lot of little things on the board. I want to buff them. I want to have random big things. I may want to Wind Fury them, but I guess not as much these days. And I don't know, if I'm a priest, I want to try to like get onto the board and then start healing the stuff and desperately try to cling onto the board up to the point in which I just snowball into my victory. If I'm a paladin, I want to buff my things on the board. If I'm a hunter, I want to smork and go face with a really good curve and some reach cards. I'm not going to say druid because druid doesn't do anything, but
Nope. They summon more beasts. They do beast things.
okay, they summon more beasts. But my point is, if you are trying to play a class kind of to its flavor. Everything's so much better now. Because you're just able to do all that stuff. Like before, right? I would play so many like shaman decks that weren't shamans because I didn't get my cards. Warrior decks that weren't warriors because I didn't get my weapons. You know, hunter decks that I couldn't smork with because I didn't get freaking 2-drops and 1-drops. That stuff doesn't happen anymore. Every class curves out the way it was supposed to before this whole OG thing happened, and then Karazhan like sunk it completely. Like every class where the Karazhan cards, to their credit, however, we'll talk about the RNG stuff next, but however crappy they may be to the whole like how skill is important in the game thing, they're flavorful in the right way, right? Like your Paladin portal buffs, your Mage portal is a spell that's a removal. If you're a hunter, you got beasts and curve cards. If you're a druid, you got beast cards as well. If you're a shaman, you're more able to stay off the board. If something's a weapon, you care about spell damage, you have another board clear, which you hadn't gotten in a long time, even though that was always part of your kit. If you're a warrior, you have this insanely good weapon on turn 5. Like this, that helps you get back on the board, which you need. This is this is a crazy good time to be exploring other classes, is what I'm saying. Like, diversity-wise, ignore what other people are doing in the meta. If you're a player of Hearthstone Arena, and you want to eventually play all the classes, or more or less all the classes, or all the classes except one, because you can't stand the way Thrall looks. Sorry, personal things getting in here. The Murloc is much better. The Murgle is way better. You just have to swap your portrait, and everything works out. Then you're in a good place. The arena has never been more balanced. If what you care about is diversity in the 9 classes big picture. But on the other hand, the arena has probably never been worse. Actually, no, I'll say it straight out. The arena has never been worse, diversity-wise, if what you care about is who's in the premium tier. Because there's no competition, it's Mage. But everything else, I think Blizzard totally accomplished their goals, and the top and the bottom have squished very significantly.
Yeah, so Blizzard accomplished that, but do you think they accomplished... So they hit that effect, right? But do you think that they actually hit their intended effect, which is for a majority of players to think that the game is better and more enjoyable?
Okay, see, I'm not gonna, I'm not their PR guy. I'm not their, how do we sell this game to casual players guy. That's not my job. I'm not gonna take that job. I will sometimes think about what the average player will do, because I'm facing them, or because I'm trying to predict Blizzard's next move, or because I'm trying to understand what Blizzard's doing. But I don't care if they accomplish their goals. Right? That's not my place. I'm an infinite player. I am playing at the highest level. I care about learning about the game, doing well about the game, and anticipating Blizzard's actions. I don't know, right? At the bottom line, I don't know. I'm not the average player that Blizzard is marketing to.
Right.
And I don't know about the perception of whether Arena is balanced or not. I don't know. Reading about stuff, I think generally people think that the patch has been... if you don't read the things from the players who are really good and who are you just read regular, let's say the main subreddit of Hearthstone, it seems like it was a lot less outrage than there was beforehand.
Right, but here's the thing. It might not matter to you because you're like, well, I don't care about normal players and how they perceive things. I think it matters when you think about, did Blizzard accomplish what it wanted to accomplish?
Right, but why...
That's important to me.
Why is that important?
Because it's sort of scary, because if they don't accomplish what they want to do, that means they didn't do a good job at it.
Yeah,
obviously.
but what does it matter if they're not good at creating perceptions of balance if what you care about is actual balance? Because creating the perception of balance has not the same skill set as creating actual balance.
No, that's if part of their goal is to change the perception as well.
Yeah,
right?
I definitely think I'm not arguing with your premise that that's what they were trying to do. I'm saying whether they were good or successful at it or whatever, it doesn't really concern me, because what I care about is whether they're actually going to balance the game and how good they are at actually balancing the game. And I think the effects are, generally speaking, positive, with some costs that we talked about, in the last 2 Lightforges that probably were unnecessary casualties, and there are also some low-hanging fruit they didn't take. But I don't know, do you have an answer to your own question that you wanted to share about the perception of the arena? No,
not really. We could just move on. Well, no. I mean, okay. In all honesty, I think that if you sort of look at it in this way, right? Like
Right. But like,
Blizzard wanted the perception of the arena to be better, as well as the
yep.
actual
I think
substance
that's
of the
true.
arena,
I think that's
right?
undeniably true. That's what
Right,
they
right,
wanted.
right. And if they fail in that, and like I don't think that's a good sign for future changes if they sort of mess up, because I think the perception is a lot easier to get than
It's
the actual
different skill
substance. Substance is
set.
hard.
One's a PR skill set. One's like a mechanical, like balancing a
No, no,
strategy
I
game
think
skill
they're
set.
really intricately tied together. Like,
Mm.
but you can really, I mean, not fail completely in the substance portion. You can sort of hit that, but still, like, score A+ on the perception side. I think that on the perception side, people are just as disappointed.
Do you?
And
I think there's less outrage. I think even if we are to talk about perceptions, I don't know, just from my casual observations of the Hearthstone Reddit, which is where I get all of my Hearthstone news and information.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. So I guess it's a coin flip whether the perception worked too well, but I think it does. On the other hand, as we're going to talk about, at least a lot of the hardcore people in the arena community don't feel that it has. But I think the casual players think that it has. If anything, just because Blizzard did something, and it wasn't like a total failure. Like you're not arguing that it was like a total failure, right? You're just arguing that it
No,
was
no, no.
like it didn't really do much to it. But I think even if it just didn't do much to it, the fact that they're doing something makes casual players quite happy.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so yeah, that's I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But so okay. So the question is, are things better? And we have given a very nuanced answer to are things better, which is that depending on what your perspective is and what you're trying to do, things are either better or they're worse. But generally, I'm on the side of things are better, and Merps is a downer and a hater, and this is just like when we try to do the tier list, and every time I try to bring a card up, he's like knocking it down.
I don't know. So far, though, because you've been having this new formula, I'm like, no, this has to be higher, or like
That's true.
this
That's
has to be
true.
higher.
That is true. My new formula is quite punishing. It's a
It's
bit.
really punishing, especially for high drops, and we're
Yeah.
still. I,
You gotta get under. You gotta get under a certain like mana cost. That's.
I, I think we still have stuff to talk about potentially, but
We'll
We'll
see.
see.
Okay, deep fried meta. Let's talk about this. So Dr. Stein, who's one of our mods, made a really good post. You should go read it if you haven't already. It's long though. It's on the Arena HS subreddit, which is the subreddit about all arena stuff. And basically, he's like a super infinite player, wins all the games, knows all the classes, and he's arguing, he has a bunch of arguments in there, but I'm going to pick on one aspect that I think is really interesting, and it's true, and we've talked about it, but I don't think we've focused too much on it, mostly because I'm just happy it's not worse. And that is that his claim is that this meta is the most RNG meta ever. Maybe even as RNG as GBG, but regardless, it's definitely more random than we've seen in a long time, because GBG was like 2 years ago. And obviously, if you're a good infinite player, randomness is bad. And I won't get, and the reasons for the randomness is quite obvious, right? All the Karazhan cards that are good are pretty random. You have your portals, they're all random. You have your Spirit Claws, which is random because that totem thing is random. And he also links in combos, and we'll talk about that. So today's Deep Fried Meta, where we deep fry the meta, we're going to talk about randomness and what it means in a card game like Hearthstone, and what levels of it are acceptable and good and what falls in the category. So I'm going to start at the very basics, okay? And Magic the Gathering players know this better than Hearthstone players, which is that it's a card game. Everything's random. You take 3 random cards at the beginning. You get a mulligan, but then the cards you get back are random. Every single card you get is random. Every single card draw you do is random. In Magic the Gathering, you have lands, and that's even more random. But at the very least, if you don't get your drops, that's randomness, and you will lose. Compared to someone who does get their drops, right? That's pretty basic in the arena. Everyone kind of understands it. But the fundamental thing about the arena is that every single thing is random. So when we're saying oh, this is like a vanilla card without randomness. We don't mean that it has no randomness. The fact that you drew it instead of another card was random. But each level that we go up, you can mitigate the randomness down, which means that your skill becomes a higher portion. So like a Yeti is actually a very high skill card because there's zero randomness to it. Other cards can be even more high skill, such as, let's say, Argent Commander, right? It has a charge. You can hit a minion. You can hit your opponent's face. It is 6 mana. And it is just a very not random card that has a higher skill cap and a higher skill floor than Chillwind Yeti to use. It's not terribly complicated, but, it's there. You have something like Fellreaver that is not really very random. But it is really hard to use because you can lose the game with it, right? Same with Venture Co. Mercenary. The other part of randomness, though, is because every card you draw is random, right? Remember the basics. The fundamental part of a card game is that every card you draw is random. Anything that requires you to draw more cards is more random. So if a card says you can do this by itself, it's like randomness, let's say level like 1. And it's randomness level 2 if it says you can do something but only with another card. And then depending on how rare the other card is, it gets more and more random. So the more different types of cards you need to do stuff, the more random it is. And it goes up exponentially because each card, to combo with another card, you already have one card slot that's been taken. So you have lower chances of getting something you need. And if you have 2 cards, you need a third card to combo with. It gets even exponentially worse because now you have 2 slots that are taken and you're only getting the other ones. This is just basics of how card games works for those of us who haven't thought about it at the zeros and ones level. And so from that viewpoint, that's why people say combos are random, right?
Yep.
That's why if you're a good infinite player, you don't like high combo kind of cards. Is it skillful to know when to draft them? Yes, because you have to play the odds. You have to know that sometimes if you randomly have a 70% chance to win with this card and your other choices lower your normal win percentage by 10%, your normal win percentage is like 75% at best. So you're asking, do I want a 70% chance to win or a 65% chance to win? You should take the 70, even if that's pure RNG coin flip, right? So yes, there is some skill in the drafting part of it. There is some skill in the do I hold it, do I play it part. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to build a deck that requires a bunch of pieces to come together, or if you're trying to draft a deck that has a bunch of pieces to come together, you don't have those cards yet, what you're doing is a very low skill thing. What you're doing is rolling the dice when you don't have to, because a good player wins like more than 70% of their games pretty easily. So combos are inherently more RNG than non-combos. And the more esoteric a combo is, the worse it is. So in addition to all the normal RNG stuff, and I think he's definitely correct to do this, and there's some argument on Reddit about whether it's actually random or not, and like people are like, I like combo decks, which is good. Combo decks are awesome and fun, but Netherspite Historian is a good example, right? It's in the meta constructed, right? If I'm correct.
Yes.
And it's a 1/3/2 drop where if you have a dragon in your hand, you discover another dragon, and the dragon you discover is going to be amazing more often than not.
Yeah, so, I mean, dragons are usually really good.
Yeah. So because the dragons are really good, this has a very high potential to be good. But to draft a deck where this is at all not totally stupid as a 2-mana 1/3, you need dragons. And you have no control over the dragons. And I'm just like parroting some of the points that Dr. Stein makes, but it's completely correct. And I'm focusing on the areas that I think are the most convincing. It's entirely random how many dragons you have. And you average like 0.5 dragons per deck. It's some ridiculously low number, like less than 1. And so if you're taking a Netherspite Historian, which has an offering bonus, without already a lot of dragons, that's a bad pick. That's I'm going to get my dragons pick. On the other hand, when you're playing, no matter how many dragons you have, it's really random. Like, let's say you have 3 dragons. You may not get 3 dragons in your entire game before it's too late, right? Like,
right.
They can all happen in the second half of your deck, and you're dead by then. Or you've won the game by then. And so,
yeah.
this is one more of the reason. And if you look at randomness, here's something else that you may not think about, but it's completely true, which is high costing cards are more random than low costing cards. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of the high costing cards on the Lightforge podcast are rated lower right now. It's because if you have a 10 mana card, are you alive at 10 mana? Because just because you have a 10 mana card doesn't mean it's always playable on turn 10, right? Like, you still have to find a spot to play it. You could be dead by then. You could have already won by then. It has a high chance of not helping you do anything. Whereas a smaller card always gives you more choices that you can play in earlier turns, which makes it less random and more in your control. And if you have a card that is actually like a very low mana cost, like a curve card or whatever, that you would keep in a mulligan, it's even less random because you have 2 shots for it. So it cuts down on the randomness on that. So the better of a player you are, the more you're going to hew away from those higher costing cards. It's a little mitigated by the fact that you want the game to go longer the better of a player you are generally, because you have more decisions on both sides. But like, again, like, I'm really delving into like what randomness is and how it affects the game. Like, this is how you should think about the game, and it's kind of a meta game, because this whole thing about randomness really revolves around how good you are as a player, right? Because your base win percentage with 0 randomness determines how much randomness you should accept. If all you care about is winning. So
okay, so I also read Dr. Stein's post. I thought it was very well written. Now, just to add something to what you said, which may or may not be relevant to everything that you just said. No. So I definitely agree with the premise that this is the most RNG we have ever seen.
Yes. Oh, right? Yeah. I definitely went on a huge tangent on what randomness is, rather than like, is the Karazhan meta? Yeah. Okay.
Right. And I'm like, I believe we asked a question.
Yeah. Before. Let's get back to the topic. But I wanted to set up the framework. So, like, if you haven't thought about randomness in this way before, or if you thought about it in this way before and you kind of, like, started thinking about it in another way, this is just what randomness is. Everything's random. You're playing a random game. And the level of management is very much a part of what you're doing in this game.
All right.
Okay. And before we get back to the point, I do want to say one thing about Firelands Portal and why we have it rated so low. It's randomness on top of randomness, right? 7 mana is pretty late in the game. It has a random effect. And it's a more situational card than it normally is, right? You need a target for it. You may have to spend it on like something with only 3 health more often than you would have to spend like a fireball on it. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Sure. It's interesting that we see Dr. Stein's post about this because I believe it was just like 2 weeks ago when Reynad made a video that got lots of traction on Reddit, right? And he sort of pointed out the same thing. He's basically saying that Hearthstone is going down this really unhealthy pathway towards bad RNG, right? Yep. And he singled out Swashbuckler as one of the main culprits. Yeah. He's saying Swashbuckler and to an extent Babbling Book. Yeah, right?
Swashbuckler is worse than Babbling Book.
Yeah. And he's saying that like this is RNG that has no counterplay, right? Mm-hmm. Because for some RNG cards, you have a good amount of counterplay. Either they are too late in the game, like Firelands Portal, or you have some clues as to what the card is or what you can do against it, mm-hmm. right? And we'll take Swashbuckler, and I want to talk about the portals next. These are cards that are just too powerful. Like, you have to take them because they're so powerful, and there's no counterplay to their RNG. When Swashbuckler takes a card from your class, you have no idea what it is. Like, you have no idea what it is, and if they don't play it for a few turns, you're like, well, I guess I could take out like 3 cards out of the 30 cards that they could have taken. And so there's no counterplay. You have no idea what it is, and then they just surprise you with it. With the portals, there's no counterplay against it either. Like, both of you are waiting anxiously to see if it's a 3/3 or if it's a 7/8 taunt, right? Or if it's like a 5/7 with charge. There's just no counterplay to these things. And then Karazhan offered this, like all of these cards in terms of just lots of randomness. And it wouldn't be as bad if these RNG cards were not necessary. But in
Right.
today's meta, they are absolutely
Medea's
necessary.
valet.
Yeah, like if you look at sort of how the meta has changed, it's not just like some are faster, some are slower. Decks today are substantially more powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than like in
Yes.
classic, how did you win? You won by being as boring and as vanilla as possible, right?
Yeti.
Yeah, exactly. Yeti, Boulderfist
Ben
Ogre.
Creeper.
If you try to get
Ogre.
fancy with some combos,
You
you're gonna
lose.
get overwhelmed with just sheer vanilla value.
Yep. Because
Today,
your high like your
yeah,
gains are low comparatively to where they are today by going the
exactly.
combo route.
But today, you will like if you draft a pretty powerful vanilla deck with maybe a couple of like cheat mechanisms and buffs here now and then, you will lose at least one game to a crazy combo deck,
Yep.
right? Or a crazy synergy deck. Sorry, I shouldn't say combo, like a crazy synergy deck.
Mm-hmm.
The druid that has 3 marks and like 8
Yep.
beasts and
There's no
2 menagerie.
counterplay to that.
Yes.
That's why, like, if you talk to people who are, just starting to get good in the arena or who are not good, they're very interested in these decks. Partly because they're fun, and those people care more about fun than people who are super serial about this stuff like we are. But also because they have really good effects. They have like these great stories where they like wreck people with these decks. And why do they do it? Well, it's because there's no counterplay. It's because if your skill level is like a 6 out of 10 and you're trying to take down people whose skill level is 8 out of 10, you want to maximize the crap out of that randomness, right? You want to make sure that 8 out of 10 player can't counterplay you no matter what happens, right? You get your cards, you win. That's a good thing. On the other hand, if you're let's say your skill is 6 and you're facing someone whose skill is 3, you want to like get rid of all that randomness because if you don't hit it, you would lose, and that's bad. So if that's why randomness is necessary in card games to begin with, right? Because it
It
gives
is.
everybody a chance to win. It's not chess. It's not supposed to be chess.
Right. This is why poker is infinitely more popular than chess,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like to the public, because yes, skill wins overall, but people want that excitement. They
Yeah.
want to see
Anybody
some
can win any particular game, any particular
exactly.
hand.
Yep. Just like, people complain about Yogg and they complain about this, but they want to see. This is why Trollden is so popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is why people like seeing the runner backdoor straight or
Yeah.
something like that.
People are weird.
People are weird, but people like seeing this.
No.
So it is necessary, but I think the criticism is valid in that you want counterplay, right? You want interaction and you want some sort of control and a little bit less of a swing from your RNG.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so we'll talk about more about randomness some other time. There's a lot to talk about in randomness, but I wanted to set up the fundamentals in case people were like trying to think about how randomness is affecting the arena. And for what it's worth, I agree. I think it's the most random meta we've been in. I kind of like. I'm not too opposed to this type of like randomness, right? Like I think the meta's pretty good, right? Like I think compared to Merps and compared to Dr. Stein, I like where the meta is right now. But it's undeniable that it has one of the highest rates of randomness, and I do think that the randomness for some of the for like a GVG meta would be significantly more random, just because that's I get on the board, I win, right? Like that has even less counterplay than I get a Doom Guard, because a Doom Guard is like what, 2 more mana's worth of stats than you should get. Like, it's not the end of the world. It's bad, but it's not the end of the world. So you have a swing of like 2 mana's worth of stuff on the 2 mana's worth of tempo on the board either way with that Firelands portal, which again, you don't want that kind of swing, but you can live with it. You can't live with, oh, I didn't curve out 2-3, or he curved out better 2-3. Now I just lose. Right? That was the GVG meta, and that's actually even fewer counterplays, even few ways to prepare against it. But yeah, like I play this game because of the randomness, and I recognize good randomness and bad randomness, but I also recognize how to like swing with it, and it's not like it's too seriously impacting win rates. Anytime you have more randomness, you're going to lower the win rates of good players and raise the win rates of or more average players. But I think the effect is it's okay right now, right? This is like the priest. If they keep going down this direction, bad stuff is going to happen. And right now, it's not necessarily in a good spot, but it's okay. Like I'm okay with where things are right now. And generally, it's my thoughts on the meta right now. It's fun to play in this meta, especially if you are not playing mage and you are not playing rogue and you are not playing paladin, because you get to play the other classes the way you can play, the way you have been playing rogue, paladin, and mage for like the last year. Right? It's about time you could play these other classes those ways and get like decent results.
Yep. So we'll see where they go. Like, I definitely think it's an issue that needs to be addressed in the next expansion. They can't keep on putting out cards like these portals and swashbucklers. Otherwise, like, you can't print too many of these cards that are weak, right? First of all, just because no one will play them and nobody just be like, why did you create these? These suck. These all suck. Like, there's no point to them.
Yeah, you can't create too many vanilla cards either.
Right, you can't print too many vanilla cards, but then if you print, then if you keep on going down this route of powerful cards with a lot of RNG effects, and because they're RNG, you can afford to make them powerful, right? And say that, oh, it's RNG, so it's, and consistency is worth something in this game. It's worth a lot,
to good players.
Right. But then you create, like, it's like, oh, well, I need a lot of these RNG cards in my deck, and on average, it'll be much more powerful, but on any given game, I would just lose. So,
all right.
Huge.
Question from the GOAT. What have you got? You told me you're going to surprise me with it, which I don't like.
Question from the GOAT. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a huge, it's like, where were you last Saturday at 6 p.m.? Because I have evidence that you
It's probably playing Overwatch.
I don't know. Your life is not that exciting. Neither is mine.
It's not.
Yeah. No, the question is, because sort of on the heels of Blizzard putting out massive changes in the arena, like, I want to think about like other massive changes, right? Do you think that Blizzard will ever introduce a 10th class, and should they?
I don't think they're anywhere close to that. And I think that is so much freaking work and balancing and figuring it all out. And they have to immediately introduce so many class cards just to like put it on par with everyone else.
That's the thing. Like, for every expansion that comes out, it becomes harder, significantly harder for them to create another class, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. Like, as much as I want to see it,
What's next? It's like Monk and Death Knight are the next two, right? Like if you go by WoW.
If they create them, but. I don't know.
They said there weren't any plans to do it. I think they've been like holding on to that. Eventually they'll have to. It's way too much of a moneymaker not to. And it'll bring excitement back into the game whenever they feel like it's reached a critically low point. Because Hearthstone, like, I don't think Hearthstone's like Magic the Gathering in that sense that Magic the Gathering literally gets more people to play it every year. I don't know how. It just like keeps growing. Not at a terribly fast pace, but it keeps growing. I don't think Hearthstone is like that. I think Hearthstone's definitely, because it's still a video game, right? Like, Magic the Gathering is a card game. This is still a video game, and so there's a kind of a different market. And so Hearthstone, whether it's going to plateau or it's going to dip, Blizzard's on top of it. They'll try to do stuff to try to bring the Overwatch players, to try to bring the Heart of the Storm? Heroes of the Storm players, to bring them back. It's good that Hearthstone is still the dominant, by far, like player in the virtual card game market, but they'll use it as a marketing thing, and it will take them like a whole year to develop this class. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, like not in the next year or two.
I don't think it'll happen in the next 2 years. Definitely not the next 2 years. And then after that, who knows what's going to happen with Hearthstone in general. So. They got a lot of work ahead.
Yep, they do. Okay, so let's talk about card good bad then, where we tell you whether a card is good or bad. And this is a card that we thought was pretty bad when we first rated it. And now, I don't know where it is, but I think it's pretty high. Now that we've played with it, and we've seen it in action played against us, and we're like, all right, at the end of the day, this card isn't that bad. It's bad, but there are plenty of cards that are worse than it. It is our Candlesmith. It's a 46 right now.
That's decent.
Yeah. And I like how we're using all these numbers, but we're doing another scaling that will change, like that won't change anything relative to other cards, but will like lower all the numbers a bit anymore because they're still a little high for my comfort. Um,
Yep.
and some like it will solidify at some point, I promise, guys. But we're tweaking a lot of things
The
right
tier
now.
list is still under construction right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's going through. It's going through its thing. But it is Arcanosmith, and Arcanosmith is a 4 mana common card, neutral, 3/2, Battlecry, summon a 0/5 minion with taunt. So you wanted to talk about this card. What is so not bad about this card? Because it sounds pretty bad. It sounds like it is a shield bearer with a raptor for 4 mana rather than 3.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, if you look at it in terms of, like, if you look at Sludge Vulture as, man, it's just a Senja with a Gold Shard Footman, right? And Gold Shard Footman is not great. And you package, it's like, oh, you're forcing me to
Okay, but
package a
that's
Gold Shard Footman with it.
but that's a 4 mana card and a 1 mana card together
Sure.
to form a 5 mana card.
Yes, yes. Well,
And the
I mean,
4
there's a
mana
reason
card's a
Sludge
really
Vulture
good
is
4 mana
premium,
card.
and this is not premium,
Okay.
right? No, no. But what I'm saying is, like, these are things in which the perception is a lot worse than what it actually plays out as, right? Because for this one, I'm just like, gosh, it's really just a raptor and a significantly overcosted shield bearer. Well, shield bearer's bigger brother. That's glorious, apparently. But man, that 0/5 taunt really impacts the board. Like, it significantly changes the board. The 3/2 is not. I mean, it's obviously not what you want for 4 mana, but just by being able to stall a turn, setting up for your AOE's, sort of like forcing your opponent to play different ways. I think all of these sort of small advantages, like, sort of like, push me towards liking this card more and more, right? And when I am on the other side of Arcanosmith, when I am trying to be the aggressor, or I'm on the board and they play an Arcanosmith and create some awkward situations for me, I'm just like, wow, like, now I'm actually open to a couple of punishes in terms of buffs, in terms of this or that, and it just slows down the game, right? On my end, if I'm the control, and I put down Arcanosmith, like I said, it opens up another turn for AoE. If I am facing the Arcanosmith, I'm just like, well, now there's more chances for my opponent to sort of come back, right? So it definitely has its uses there, and it's so annoying that you can sort of forgive its stats and its distribution, because it's really effective at what it does. And annoying cards in Hearthstone are, they definitely have a place in decks.
CEG Annoyotron.
Annoyotron, yes.
Yep, I agree. It's okay. Like, I'm not terribly disappointed when I have to take it these days, but you kind of have to have a. And the good part is, I think this was most surprising, but it shouldn't have been because it's how taunts work. It's that it's flexible. You can have it in an aggressive deck, and it works really well because you care about the tempo gain, and it has quite a lot of tempo gain in forcing your opponents to hit that 0/5 thing, and which allows your minions to deal one more round of damage, while still putting a 3/2 body on the board, which is not nothing. And if you're on defense, obviously it taunts damage, which is good. And if they are the ones that are being aggressive, maybe your 3/2 is all it takes, right? To remove something of a decent size that your opponent has. Or it forces your opponent to also trade into your 3/2, so your 3/2 doesn't, take a good trade off his board. In either case, it causes weird things to slow your opponent down. And they're not really hitting the right targets anyway because you have this taunt that's kind of getting in the way. So it causes these kind of weird tempo issues that makes it punch a little bit above its like technical weight.
Yep.
All right, so that's card good bad, and we were going to talk about paladins, but we're going a little over. I don't want to spend too long on this. It's paladins. It's fine. It's the right class. Nothing changed with it. This is what we're going to play in the arena coop, and I think the only thing I kind of want to talk to you about is, why is Paladin okay? Why does Blizzard think Paladin is fine just the way it is? It is the perfect child of Blizzard. Nothing needs to change.
Well, okay, here's the thing. If you're a conspiracy theorist, you would say Ben Broden likes Paladin the best, which I think he stated he does, right? Like,
yeah.
Just his favorite class. But in all honesty, I think because we've already established that the changes they've made were very much so stat oriented, right?
Yep.
Like statistically oriented. I think they just looked at Paladin and they're like, okay, this is sort of what we want. Like we want Paladins to have sort of like factor X and factor Y and factors like we want this class to have these things. And they looked at Paladin and they're like, okay, statistically from our metrics, it just fits all of these. So let's bring everyone online. I think that they wanted a center point anyways. If it wasn't going to be Paladins, it was going to be like Druid, right? They're like,
no, it's not Druid. Druid is one of the worst classes.
Exactly. Well, I'm saying like you have to pick a class.
Yeah.
Like you can't say we're going to change everyone and not have a focus point.
Right.
Like, if you're just doing all of these in terms of balance, well, you have to balance around something. Like you have to either balance around an idea or you have to balance around a class. And balancing around an idea, quote, is pretty tough to do in Hearthstone. So you just balance around a class and say, well, okay, if we do this, we bring this class is 2 drops more in line with the Paladin in terms of buffs. Like, well, maybe a buff is worth like 1.2 of initiative. I don't know. I have no idea how the calculations work, but they just looked at Paladin and they're like, I think it's fine in terms of what our ideal numbers are. So let's just bring everyone, or try to bring everyone closer to this equilibrium here.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
I think that's what they did. And, I mean, I could see it, right? Like, Paladin is the 3rd best class. We've been saying it. It's been true. And they didn't really need to touch it. I will say that the weird thing about the balancing thing is that cards like Shatter and like Eye for an Eye, right? Like Eye for an Eye is fine because it's a secret. We've gone over this whole thing with Snipe, but like there's also some like pretty bad like Mage, Paladin, and Rogue cards that just weren't removed, and I don't know what they're gonna do about it. Because like, look, if we're having a draft, right? Which we are having a draft, and we get offered like anything can happen. I don't know what to do with that. Like, I don't know.
You just don't take it.
Yeah. If we're playing Mage and you get offered Shatter, I think those are the big ones. But even something like Ethereal Arcanist, like, there's no reason for them to be in the arena, but they need to make the offering odds the way they are. So the fact that Paladin is a untweaked class in the arena means that statistically it is the most balanced. It does not mean it's actually balanced.
No.
Druid is actually balanced. Druid is the most normal kind of consistent class you're going to draft. Paladins have a bunch of pretty bad cards. And they have a bunch of pretty good cards. And that's not the kind of balance that you would prefer, right? Like, I'm looking at the Paladin right now. Muster for Battle, Argent Lance, True Silver Champion, right? Like, these are pretty insane cards. And then on the other side, you have things like Eye for an Eye, Sacred Trial, Anything Can Happen, Holy Light. Your Karazhan card is Nightbane Templar, which is going to show up a ton. Like, these aren't good things. And so your drafts are going to be less consistent. Which, I guess, in a way, is actually balanced. Because Paladin normally has a very balanced draft. Like in the old days, right? You're generally going to get your stuff with Paladin because all their stuff kind of fits the same mold. They're either really powerful removals, or they are things that buff your board, or there are things that help you get the board. So, I guess by keeping whatever instability they had, they make them as stable as a class like, let's say, Warlock or Warrior, where they remove the instability.
Right. With Paladins, like, look, they're not powerful enough in which they can take away good cards from them.
Mm-hmm.
But with Paladins, because their power cards are just so powerful, right? You take away some cards, and suddenly they are just like, man, you better not leave up a 1/1 on the board, or they are just going to completely obliterate you.
They need to kill Keeper of Oldemon.
They do.
They need to kill Keeper of Oldemon. Yeah, they need to get rid of that card.
Yep.
They need to get rid of Keeper of Oldemon, and then also like Anything Can Happen, and like Nightbane Templar. As soon as this like meta's over, you can keep Nightbane Templar. I don't even care. Just get rid of Anything Can Happen. Okay. So that's it from us. This is the Lightforge. We'll see you again next week. And if you're watching us live, we'll be doing the arena coup with the Paladin, the ex third best class in the arena. Now, who knows? Until next time, this is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. Bye.